Alright, so if you've been following this project and this channel, you'll know that we use guidance tubing to direct the muscle tendon fishing line string to where we need it to go in the robot's body. And that enables us to make turns and to have enough slack there so that like when the wrist bends or something, there's enough slack in the lines running through the wrist that doesn't like pull things out of whack or cause a finger to actuate when it shouldn't be, etc. It works the same way as bike brake tubing, where there's slack around the handlebars because you don't want the brakes to deploy just because you're turning the bike brakes. Same principle there. So I want to show you guys where to get this type of fine tubing like I get, how to actually buy it on eBay. All right, so here's something like how you can look it up to buy this type of tubing. You can type in PTFE2 slash tubing slash pipe insulation sleeve. You can type in the ID and the OD you want maybe for 3D printer slash transformer. Okay, so that pulled up this listing. I think is where I bought mine. Um, and basically. Okay, so I bought this from this listing. Um, you can select that and then your length and then your color. I just do clear. And there it is. For 20 meters, it would be $14. 20 meters is 60 feet about for $14. Um, but you don't have to buy from that particular listing. Um, you can shop around different ones. Like this might be a good one to check out. They might have more stuff. ID by OD. So yeah, it goes 1 millimeter by 2 millimeter is the smallest, and then 1.5 millimeter. Now remember, the string we chose for the fingers, which will be pretty much the smallest string we'll be using for the motors for the fingers, are the smallest motors we're going to be using for everything except like facial expressions and stuff later on, or maybe like turning the eyes or lips or whatever. As far as like real muscles of like actuating the fingers, the arms, the wrists, the thumb, the forearms, everything, back muscles, it's going to be that size motors and bigger. So the very smallest thread that we chose for our smallest muscles, besides that exception with the facial expressions or blinking or whatever, will be the 0.63 millimeter braided fishing line, which again is this stuff we selected for that. It's a 130-pound test, and this is the type of tubing you're going to want to buy. You can get this. So like if we want to get tubing for our 300-pound test or 500-pound test fishing line that we also bought, we'd have to bump it up to maybe 2 millimeters by 3 millimeters or whatever, to get the little extra inner diameter required to fit the larger diameter fishing line. So that's how you would do it. So this is where I'll go when I need to buy more. But I'm just focused on just the fingers for now, and I can worry about buying the right one for the bigger stuff later. So I'm really glad this stuff exists. This is perfect for our application. Also, you'll note that this this type of tubing is, hold on a second. Oh goodness, Teflon is PTFE, but by another name. Good. Okay, so TPFE and PTFE are the same thing. That's good to know because I keep flip flopping it and then think I'm going crazy. Both of those names exist, and if you type in TPFE, you'll find similar stuff. Um, it just happens to be that the tubing that I found is the perfect sizes happen to have the name PTFE, but it's Teflon tube in either case. Teflon tubing is great because Teflon is a very slippery thing by nature, and we want as low a friction as possible. Although we'll touch on friction a little more later, it might not be as bad of a thing as we think. Um, but in general, you want to try to minimize it in most cases. So basically, Teflon in its powder form is mixed with lubricant, and it forms a critical part of like lube for gears, like for a printer or whatever. Teflon lubricant. So it's really slippery as far as its surface energy or something like that. It's just a slippery thing. And so it's perfect as tubing to send string sliding through because it's slippery by nature. And if you add to that some Teflon lubricant on the string that will be pulled through these tubes and eventually lubricate the inner walls of these tubes, the, the fishing line or string will slide even more effortlessly through this, which some other roboticists have been doing. So I highly recommend this type of listing. And it's a very nice asset for us to be able to control and direct the thread throughout the robot. Okay, so that covers kind of how I buy my tubing and where. That's a very important thing. I do want to make a note that there's a roboticist named Will Cogley on YouTube that also uses Teflon tubing for his muscle tendon type actuator systems based on a servo acting as a winch. Um, he had some issues with the tubing crushing or compacting when actuation occurred in some cases, and some people were recommending, well, why not use bike brake tubing or motorcycle brake tubing? I disagree with that suggestion. That would be far too thick, and it would take away the miniaturization. It'd take away the ability to bend and type turns and stuff. It just would be much heavier in weight. It would cause all kinds of problems. That's not a good solution. So, in order to solve that, if I run into the same problem or recommend it to him, and I wrote this on his YouTube comment section as a comment, um, one solution for that would be to just wrap your tubing with a little bit of fiberglass tape soaked in some epoxy. Just wrap it, kind of like you'd wrap electrical tape on some wire, and then let that dry, and that will create a very thin shell around your tubing. Or you could use fiberglass tape and super glue. It doesn't have to be epoxy. I think 401 Loctite 401, or it's called 401 glue. It's not made by Loctite. It's just 401 glue. That's what I use. It's basically like super glue, but it might be more um, bendable, more flexible when it's dry. You don't want something brittle. You want something with a little bit of flex, but I don't think it has to have a ton of flex. I mean, I think that you're not talking about a lot of flex. Like the tube just maybe bends about that much, so it only needs a little bit of flex. And I think most glues, when they dry, will flex a little bit like that without snapping. I don't think they're that brittle. So I think 401 glue would work as well, and it dry a lot faster than epoxy without all the stink of epoxy. It has a lot more VOCs that get released. It's just bad. It's just ugly to deal with if you can avoid it. Even though you can have good ventilation or a respirator and stuff, you don't have to deal with that hassle if you just use 401 glue. I think that will work fine for this. I personally would use this type of tape tape I make. It's just some adhesive transfer tape on a workout shirt. You stick the adhesive transfer tape onto the workout shirt, and then you could just put that tape on and just tape your tube, and then you just squeeze some 401 glue onto your fabric outside, and that dry, harden, and create a shell. And then the shell, the same thing with whether you use fiberglass or fabric, doesn't matter. However you want to do it, with the glue and fabric, that will create a cast around it that's very thin. That will prevent it from compressing or deforming in some unexpected way during the actuation, just to give it a little bit more beef in that area that's having issues. But like in some areas of that run of the tubing, it will be non-problematic, but then maybe in some areas nearer to the motor or whatever, it might do a little bit of crushing of the tube, so then you'd want to reinforce just the areas that are crushing a little bit. And then the areas that are doing fine, you don't have to do anything with. So that's my suggestion on that to solve that issue if it comes up.